The old washing machines in the laundromat downstairs hummed their familiar tune every single day. For most people, that sound would drive them crazy. But for little Rosa, it was just part of life. She lived right above that laundromat in a tiny two-bedroom apartment with her mom. The smell of detergent and fabric softener drifted up through the floorboards, mixing with whatever her mom was cooking for dinner. Rosa's mom worked hard. Really hard. She cleaned hospital rooms during the day shift, and 3 times a week, she'd go back for the night shift too. Her hands were always red and rough from all the cleaning chemicals. Sometimes Rosa would watch her mom soak her hands in warm water before bed, and it made her heart hurt in a way she couldn't quite explain. She was only 7 years old, but she understood that life wasn't easy for them. Her dad had left when she was barely old enough to remember him. There were a few photos tucked away in a drawer somewhere, but her mom never talked about him. Rosa learned not to ask. It was just the two of them now, and that was okay. Her mom always made sure there was food on the table, even if it was just rice and beans most nights. Their clothes came from the thrift store on the corner, but her mom would spend hours fixing them up, sewing on new buttons or patching holes so carefully that you could barely tell they were secondhand. Money was tight. That's what her mom would say whenever Rosa asked for something at the store. Not no, just money's tight, baby. Rosa learned to stop asking after a while. She'd see other kids at school with new backpacks covered in cartoon characters, with lunchboxes full of snacks and treats. She had a plain blue backpack that used to belong to someone else, and a brown paper bag with a sandwich inside. But she told herself it was fine. At least she had something. The thing that changed everything happened on a boring Tuesday afternoon. Rosa's mom had to work late, so she dropped Rosa off at the community center after school. It was an old building that smelled like floor wax and old books. Most kids would go straight to the gym or the game room upstairs. There was a basketball court, some board games, and a TV that only got 3 channels clearly. Rosa usually went there too. But that day, she wandered off. She was looking for the bathroom and took a wrong turn. Instead of going upstairs, she found a staircase going down to the basement. The door was slightly open and something made her curious. She pushed it open wider and started walking down the creaky wooden steps. The basement was dimly lit and full of forgotten things. Old folding chairs were stacked against one wall. There were boxes of decorations from holidays past, some sports equipment that looked like it hadn't been used in years, and a bunch of random stuff covered in dust. But in the far corner, pushed up against the concrete wall, was something that made Rosa stop in her tracks. It was a piano. Not a fancy one. Not one of those shiny black grand pianos she'd seen on TV. This was an old upright piano that had clearly seen better days. The wood was scratched and faded. Some of the white keys had turned yellow with age, and one of them was chipped. But to Rosa, who had never been this close to a real piano before, it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. She walked toward it slowly, almost like she was afraid it might disappear if she moved too fast. When she reached it, she just stood there for a moment, staring at all those keys, black and white, lined up perfectly in a pattern she didn't understand. Her fingers were itching to touch them, but she was scared. What if she broke something? What if someone yelled at her? But the curiosity was too strong. Rosa reached out, with one finger, and pressed down on a white key near the middle. A single note rang out in the quiet basement, clear and pure. It wasn't loud, but in that silent space it felt like magic. She pressed another key, then another. Each one made a different sound, some high, some low. She started pressing them, faster, making random sounds that weren't quite music but weren't quite noise either. She didn't hear Mrs. Liu come down the stairs. The old woman worked as the janitor at the community center, and she'd been there for as long as anyone could remember. She was small and thin, with gray hair always pulled back in a neat bun. Most kids barely noticed her as she swept the floors and emptied the trash cans. "You like the piano?" Mrs. Liu's voice made Rosa jump. She spun around, her heart pounding, sure she was about to get in trouble. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just—" Rosa stammered, backing away from the piano, but Mrs. Liu was smiling. It's okay, child, nobody comes down here anymore. That piano's been sitting lonely for too long. She walked over and ran her hand along the top of the piano, wiping away some dust. You want to learn how to play it properly? Rosa's eyes went wide. Really? You know how to play? I used to teach piano, Mrs. Liu said softly. Long time ago, back in China, before I came here. My fingers are old now, but I still remember. She sat down on the worn piano bench and patted the space next to her. Come, sit, I'll show you something. Rosa couldn't believe what was happening. She sat down next to Mrs. Liu, who took Rosa's right hand and positioned it over the keys. First, you have to learn where to put your fingers. See? Thumb here, pointer finger here. She guided Rosa's small hand into the right position. Then Mrs. Liu played a simple melody. Just 5 notes, but they flowed together in a way that sounded like actual music. It was beautiful. Rosa watched her fingers move, trying to memorize exactly what she was doing. Now you try, Mrs. Liu said. Rosa's first attempt was clumsy. Her fingers didn't move the way she wanted them to. The notes came out stiff and disconnected. But Mrs. Liu was patient. Again, she said gently. Take your time. They practiced that. Simple 5-note melody until Rosa's mom came to pick her up an hour later. By then, Rosa could play it without looking at her fingers. It wasn't perfect, but it was music. Real music that she was making with her own hands. Can I come back tomorrow? Rosa asked Mrs. Liu as she headed for the stairs. The old woman smiled. I have my lunch break every day at 3 o'clock. If you want to come down here, I'll teach you what I know. That night, Rosa couldn't stop thinking about the piano. She pressed her fingers against the dinner table, pretending she was playing those 5 notes over and over. Her mom noticed and asked what she was doing. There's a piano at the community center, Rosa said, her voice full of excitement, and Mrs. Liu is teaching me how to play. Her mom looked worried for a moment. Piano lessons cost money, and they didn't have extra for things like that. But when Rosa explained that Mrs. Liu was teaching her for free during her lunch break, her mom's face softened. That's very kind of her, she said quietly. You make sure you thank her properly, you hear me? I will, Mama. I promise. Rosa didn't know it then, but that dusty basement piano and those lunch break lessons with Mrs. Liu were about to change her entire life. She just knew that she'd found something special, something that made her feel different than she'd ever felt before. When she touched those keys, nothing else mattered. Not their small apartment, not their tight budget, not the things other kids had that she didn't. When she played the piano, even just those 5 simple notes, she felt rich. 9 years passed like water flowing under a bridge. Rosa wasn't that tiny 7-year-old anymore. She was 16 now, taller, with calluses on her fingertips from thousands of hours of practice. But some things hadn't changed. She still lived in that same small apartment above the laundromat. Her mom still worked those double shifts at the hospital, and Rosa still went down to that basement almost every single day to play that old piano. Mrs. Liu had taught her everything she knew during those lunch breaks. After the first year, the old woman would bring in printed sheet music she'd find at library sales or thrift stores. Sometimes the pages were yellowed and torn, but Rosa treated them like treasure. She learned to read music the way other kids learned to read books. The notes on the page started to make sense, telling her fingers exactly where to go and when. But Mrs. Liu could only teach her so much. By the time Rosa turned 12, she'd learned everything the old janitor knew. Mrs. Liu had smiled sadly that day and said, "You've passed me now, child. You need a real teacher, someone better than an old woman who hasn't played seriously in 40 years. Rosa had hugged her tight. You're the best teacher I could have asked for. After that, Rosa taught herself. She had an old phone her mom had given her when the hospital upgraded their staff phones. It was scratched and slow, but it could connect to the community center's Wi-Fi. Rosa would sit in that basement for hours, watching free piano tutorials on video sites. She'd listen to recordings of famous pianists playing the same piece over and over until she understood every tiny detail. Then she'd try to copy what they did. It was hard, really hard. The people in those videos had studied at fancy music schools. They'd had private teachers since they were tiny kids. They practiced on expensive pianos in their homes. Rosa had none of that. She had a basement, an old upright piano that was slightly out of tune, and her own stubborn determination not to give up. Her high school music teacher, Mr. Patterson, was the first person outside of Mrs. Liu to really notice what Rosa could do. He'd heard her playing during lunch one day when he walked past the community center. He actually stopped in his tracks, turned around and followed the sound down to the basement. When he saw it was Rosa, one of his students, his jaw literally dropped. "Rosa," he'd said, standing at the bottom of the stairs. "I had no idea you could play like that." She'd felt embarrassed, caught doing something private. "I just mess around sometimes." "That wasn't messing around. That was Chopin, and you played it beautifully." He'd walk closer to the piano. "How long have you been taking lessons?" "I don't take lessons," Rosa admitted. "I just taught myself. Mostly." Mr. Patterson had looked at her for a long moment, and Rosa couldn't read his expression. Was he impressed? Disappointed? She wasn't sure. But then he'd said something that stuck with her. "Raw talent will only take you so far, Rosa, but determination can take you anywhere. Don't stop playing." She hadn't, even when her mom worried that she was spending too much time with the piano instead of focusing on getting good grades for college. Even when other kids her age were out with friends or working after-school jobs for extra money. Rosa would finish her homework as fast as she could and head straight to that basement. The piano had become more than just an instrument to her. It was her best friend, her therapist, the one place where everything made sense. When she played, she didn't have to think about bills or broken washing machines or her mom's tired face. She could pour all her feelings into the music, the frustration, the hope, the sadness, the joy. Everything came out through her fingers. Then one October afternoon, everything changed. Mr. Patterson made an announcement after music class. "Listen up, everyone. I want to tell you about an incredible opportunity." He held up a flyer. "Steinway Hall in Manhattan is hosting their annual Young Musician Showcase. They're looking for talented pianists under 18 to audition. The winner gets to perform at a gala in front of music school directors, professional musicians, and potential sponsors." Rosa's heart started beating faster. She'd heard of Steinway Hall. It was legendary, the kind of place where real musicians performed, not high school kids teaching themselves in basements. "The audition is in 6 weeks, Mr. Patterson continued. "If anyone's interested, see me after class and I'll give you the details. This is a real chance to get noticed by people who matter in the music world." Rosa stayed in her seat as other students crowded around Mr. Patterson's desk. She watched them, kids whose parents drove nice cars, who talked about their private piano teachers and their upcoming recitals. Kids who belonged in places like Steinway Hall. She didn't move. What was she thinking? She couldn't compete with them. But as the classroom emptied, Mr. Patterson called out to her. "Rosa, you're not going to ask about the audition?" She gathered her book slowly. "I don't think it's for someone like me." "Someone like you?" He raised an eyebrow. "You mean someone with real talent and dedication?" "I mean someone without formal training. Someone who learned from videos and an old woman who used to teach piano in China 40 years ago. Someone who plays on a beat-up piano in a basement." Rosa felt her cheeks getting hot. She didn't usually talk about this stuff. Mr. Patterson walked over to her desk. "Rosa, I've been teaching music for 15 years. I've had students with every advantage you can imagine. Private tutors, expensive instruments, summer programs at Juilliard. You know what most of them lack? Passion. Real, genuine love for the music. You have something special. Don't let your circumstances convince you that you don't deserve a chance." Those words echoed in Rosa's head for days. She'd go down to the basement and sit at the piano, her fingers on the keys, thinking about that audition. Could she really do it? What would she even play? What if she embarrassed herself? Mrs. Liu found her there one afternoon, just sitting and staring at the keys without playing. "What's troubling you, child?" Rosa told her about the audition, about her fears, about feeling like she didn't belong in a place as fancy as Steinway Hall. Mrs. Liu listened quietly, the way she always did, until Rosa finished. "When I was a young girl in Shanghai," Mrs. Liu said, "my family had no money. My father pulled rickshaw. My mother washed clothes for rich families. But I loved piano. I would stand outside music school and listen through windows. One day, teacher saw me. She asked why I never came inside. I said I had no money for lessons. You know what she told me?" Rosa shook her head. She said, "Music doesn't care about your money. Music only cares if you have something to say. Then she let me use practice room for free, early in morning before other students came. Mrs. Liu put her weathered hand on Rosa's shoulder. You have something to say, Rosa. I hear it every time you play. Don't let fear steal your voice. That night, Rosa talked to her mom. They were eating dinner at their small kitchen table, the sound of the laundromat's dryers rumbling below them. Rosa pushed her rice around her plate, trying to find the courage to speak. Mama, there's this audition, she finally said, at Steinway Hall in Manhattan, for young pianists. Her mom looked up concerned. Does it cost money to audition? No, it's free, but Rosa hesitated. If I get in, I'd need to take the subway into the city, and I'd need to dress nice, like really nice. Her mom was quiet for a moment. Rosa knew what she was thinking. Money was still tight. It was always tight. Her mom was saving every extra dollar for Rosa's college fund, hoping it would be enough for at least community college. When is this audition? Her mom asked. 6 weeks from now. On a Saturday. Her mom nodded slowly. We'll make it work. I have that nice dress I wore to Cousin Teresa's wedding. It's too big for me now, but I can take it in to fit you. And the subway, that's not so much. If this is important to you, baby, we'll find a way. Rosa felt tears stinging her eyes. Are you sure? Rosa, you've been going down to that basement every single day for 9 years. 9 years. You think I don't notice? You think I don't hear you humming those songs while you're doing dishes? Her mom reached across the table and took Rosa's hand. You got a gift, baby. I may not understand all that classical music, but I know when something matters. You do this audition. You go there and you show them what you can do. So Rosa decided she was going to audition. She started practicing even more intensely, choosing the piece she wanted to perform. She picked Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious. The piece was known for being technically difficult, full of dramatic chords and fast passages. But it spoke to something deep inside her. It had darkness and light, struggle and triumph. It felt like her life in musical form. 6 weeks had never felt so short and so long at the same time. The morning of the audition came faster than Rosa expected. She woke up at 6 even though they didn't need to leave until 9. Her stomach felt like it was full of butterflies doing somersaults. She couldn't eat breakfast. Just looking at the scrambled eggs her mom made turned her stomach into knots. You need to eat something, her mom said, worried. You can't play piano on an empty stomach. Rosa managed to get down half a piece of toast and some orange juice. That was it. She spent the next hour getting ready, moving in slow motion like she was in a dream. Her mom had worked magic with that old dress. It was navy blue and simple, nothing fancy, but her mom had taken it in perfectly so it actually fit. She'd even added a small white collar that she'd sewn by hand. It looked nice. Not expensive, but nice, respectable. Rosa stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. She barely recognized the girl looking back. She usually wore jeans and t-shirts. Her hair was always in a simple ponytail, but today her mom had helped her style it differently, pinning it back with bobby pins they'd bought from the dollar store. She looked older, more serious, like someone who might actually belong at a place like Steinway Hall. But inside, she felt like that scared 7-year-old who'd stumbled into the basement for the first time. The subway ride into Manhattan felt endless. Rosa sat next to her mom, clutching a small bag that held her sheet music even though she'd memorized every single note. She didn't really need the papers, but having them felt like a security blanket. Her mom held her hand the whole way, not saying much, just being there. That helped more than words could have. When they came up from the subway station and Rosa saw Steinway Hall for the first time, her breath caught in her throat. The building was beautiful, all glass and polished stone with flags flying out front and people in suits walking in and out. It looked like the kind of place where important things happened, where serious musicians performed, where dreams either came true or got crushed. It's just a building, her mom said quietly, squeezing her hand, made of bricks and glass like any other. Don't let it scare you. But it did scare her. Everything scared her. Rosa watched as other young musicians arrived with their families. A girl stepped out of a Blacktown car wearing a dress that probably cost more than Rosa's mom made in a month. It was silver and sparkled when she moved, like she was covered in diamonds. The girl's hair was done up in an elaborate style, and she carried herself with the kind of confidence that comes from always having nice things. A boy arrived in a suit that looked like it had been tailored just for him. His parents both wore expensive watches and designer sunglasses. They looked like they belonged here, like walking into places like Steinway Hall was just a normal Saturday activity for them. Rosa looked down at her simple dress and felt her confidence crumbling. What was she doing here? These kids had probably been taking lessons since they could walk. They probably had grand pianos in their living rooms and performed at recitals all the time. They probably attended fancy music camps in the summer and had teachers who'd trained at places like Juilliard. Come on, baby, her mom said gently. Let's go inside. The lobby was even more intimidating than the outside. High ceilings, marble floors that clicked when you walked on them, and huge windows that let in streams of sunlight. Everything was clean and perfect and expensive looking. Rosa felt like she was leaving dirty footprints just by walking, even though she knew that was ridiculous. They followed the signs to the waiting area for auditions. It was a large room with cushioned chairs and tables with water bottles and snacks laid out. Classical music played softly through speakers in the ceiling. About 20 other teenagers were already there with their parents, all waiting their turn. Rosa and her mom found 2 empty chairs in the corner. Rosa sat down and tried to focus on her breathing like Mrs. Liu had taught her. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow and steady. But her heart was racing like she'd just run a marathon. That's when she heard them. A group of 3 teenagers standing near the water table, talking loud enough that their voices carried across the room. The girl in the sparkly silver dress was there along with 2 others. One was a redhead in a green dress that probably also cost a fortune. The other was the boy Rosa had seen arriving in the expensive suit. Oh my God, did you guys see the practice room they have downstairs? The silver dress girl said, laughing. There's this ancient upright piano down there. Like literally ancient. I wouldn't even let my housekeeper dust that thing, let alone touch it. The boy snorted. Right? I don't understand why they even let certain people audition if they can't afford proper training. It's kind of embarrassing for everyone involved, you know? Like, why waste the judge's time? The redhead nodded. My teacher says that natural talent only gets you so far. Without proper instruction and the right resources, you'll always just be mediocre at best. It's actually sad when you think about it. Rosa felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. Her cheeks burned hot. They weren't talking about her specifically. They didn't even know her. But they were talking about people like her. People who learned on old pianos in basements. People who couldn't afford private teachers and fancy music schools. People who were, in their eyes, wasting everyone's time by even being here. Her mom must have heard it too, because her hand tightened around Rosa's. When Rosa looked over, her mom's jaw was set in that way it got when she was angry but trying not to show it. Don't listen to them, her mom whispered. They don't know anything about you. But the damage was done. All the confidence Rosa had been trying to build up over the past 6 weeks started leaking away like air from a balloon. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe coming here was a mistake. She'd learned from an old janitor on a beat-up piano. These kids had probably spent thousands of dollars on lessons. Tens of thousands, maybe. How could she possibly compete? More families kept arriving. Each one seemed more polished and put together than the last. Designer clothes, perfect hair, expensive jewelry. They all looked like they belonged in a magazine. And they all looked so comfortable, like auditioning at prestigious venues was just another normal activity for them. Rosa overheard conversations about summer programs at famous music schools in Europe, about private teachers who'd performed at Carnegie Hall, about pianos that cost as much as cars. Every word made her feel smaller and more out of place. The boy in the suit walked past Rosa and her mom at one point. He glanced at them briefly, and Rosa saw his eyes flicker over her dress, her simple hairstyle, the way they were sitting quietly in the corner instead of mingling with the other families. Something changed in his expression. Not quite contempt, but something close to it. Pity, maybe, or judgment. He looked away quickly and went back to his group. Rosa wanted to disappear. She wanted to tell her mom they should leave, that this was a mistake, that she didn't belong here. The words were right there on her tongue. But before she could say them, a woman with a clipboard walked into the room. "Good morning, everyone," the woman said with a professional smile. "Thank you all for coming. We'll be calling you back in the order you registered. When you hear your name, please proceed to the hallway where an assistant will guide you to the audition room. Remember, you'll have 15 minutes total. That includes time to introduce yourself and your piece. Any questions?" No one said anything. Wonderful. Best of luck to all of you. The woman looked at her clipboard. First up, Christopher Chen. A boy stood up and followed the woman out of the room. Everyone else settled in to wait. Rosa counted quickly in her head. She was number 14. That meant she had at least 2 hours to sit here, stewing in her own anxiety, listening to those kids talk about things she'd never experienced and could never afford. It was going to be the longest 2 hours of her life. She watched families come and go. Some kids came back from their auditions looking confident, even happy. Others looked disappointed or frustrated. One girl came out crying, and her mother immediately wrapped her in a hug and whisked her away. Rosa wondered what had happened in there. Had she messed up? Forgotten her piece? Had the judges been mean? Each audition was exactly 15 minutes. Rosa knew because she started timing them on the clock on the wall. Like clockwork, every 15 minutes another name got called. Another teenager would stand up, take a deep breath, and walk toward their moment of truth. The silver dress girl got called. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and walked out with her head held high like she was walking onto a red carpet. 15 minutes later, she came back smiling and her parents hugged her. Rosa heard her say, "That went perfectly. I nailed every note." The boy in the expensive suit went next. He came back looking satisfied, confident. He high-fived his dad. Rosa's name was getting closer. Number 11 got called. Then 12. Then 13. Her hands were sweating. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her mom leaned over and whispered, "You've got this, baby. Just remember, you're not playing for them. You're playing for you." For the music, Rosa Martinez, the woman with the clipboard, called out this was it. Rosa stood up on shaky legs. Her mom squeezed her hand one last time, and Rosa saw tears in her eyes. "Make them listen," her mom said quietly. Rosa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She walked toward the hallway where the woman was waiting. As she passed by the waiting area, she heard a whisper behind her. She couldn't make out the words, but she heard the giggle that followed, that mean kind of laugh that people do when they're making fun of someone. Her hands clenched into fists. Then she remembered what Mrs. Liu had told her all those years ago. Music doesn't care about your money. Music only cares if you have something to say. Rosa had something to say. She'd been saying it for 9 years in that basement. Now it was time to say it louder. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever. Rosa followed the woman with the clipboard, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Each step felt heavier than the last. She could feel her pulse in her throat and her fingertips everywhere. The woman didn't say anything, just walked with the kind of efficient pace that people have when they've done something 1,000 times before. They reached a set of large double doors. The woman stopped and turned to Rosa with a kind smile. "Take a breath. The judges are very nice. Just go in. Introduce yourself. Tell them what you'll be playing and then begin whenever you're ready. You've got this." She pushed open the door. Rosa stepped inside and the door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded way too final. The audition room took her breath away. It wasn't just a room. It was a concert hall, smaller than she'd imagined but still impressive. There were rows of empty seats rising up toward the back, all covered in deep red fabric. The walls were wood-paneled and elegant. The lighting was soft and warm. And there, in the center of the stage, sat the most beautiful piano Rosa had ever seen in her life. It was a Steinway grand piano, gleaming black like a mirror. The lid was propped open, showing the strings inside. Even from where she stood at the back of the room, she could tell it was perfect. Not a scratch on it. Not a key out of place. This wasn't like the old upright in the basement. This was the kind of piano that Rosa had only seen in videos, the kind that famous concert pianists played. 3 judges sat at a table in the front row. 2 men and 1 woman. They all had notepads and pens in front of them. The woman in the middle, who had silver gray hair pulled back in an elegant bun, looked up and smiled warmly at Rosa. "Come in, dear. Don't be shy." Rosa walked down the aisle toward the stage. Her legs felt like jelly. She had to climb 5 steps to get up to the stage level, and she was terrified she'd trip and fall flat on her face. But somehow she made it up without stumbling. Standing on that stage under the lights with those 3 judges watching her, Rosa felt exposed. Like everyone could see right through her and know that she didn't belong here. That she was just a girl from a tiny apartment who'd learned piano in a basement. "Whenever you're ready, please introduce yourself and tell us what you'll be playing today," the silver-haired woman said. Her voice was gentle, encouraging even. Rosa cleared her throat. "My name is Rosa Martinez. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. "I'll be playing Prelude in C-sharp minor by Rachmaninoff." One of the male judges, a man with glasses and a beard, raised his eyebrows slightly. Rosa couldn't tell if that was good or bad. Rachmaninoff was hard. Really hard. Maybe he thought she was being too ambitious. Maybe he thought she'd chosen it to show off and would end up embarrassing herself. "Excellent choice," the silver-haired woman said. "That's a challenging piece. We're looking forward to hearing your interpretation." Rosa nodded and walked over to the piano. She stood there for a moment, just looking at it. Up close, it was even more beautiful. The keys were perfectly white and black, not yellowed with age like the ones she was used to. The bench was cushioned and adjusted to exactly the right height. Everything about this piano screamed quality and perfection. She sat down and her hands trembled as she placed them on the keys. This was it. This was the moment that everything had been building toward. 9 years of practice. 9 years of lunch breaks with Mrs. Liu and late nights teaching herself from videos. 9 years of dreaming about something more than that basement and that old piano. But now that she was here, all Rosa could think about were those teenagers in the waiting room. Their expensive clothes and their cruel words. The way that boy had looked at her like she was less than, like she was wasting everyone's time. What if they were right? Rosa's fingers hovered over the keys, but she couldn't make herself press down. The silence in the room was deafening. She could feel the judges waiting. Any second now they'd realize she was a fraud. That she didn't belong here. That this whole thing was a huge mistake. She heard movement behind her and turned slightly. Through the glass panels on the doors at the back of the hall, she could see faces pressed against the window. Other contestants watching, waiting to see what would happen, waiting to see if she'd fail. Rosa saw the girl in the silver dress, saw the smirk on her face, saw her whisper something to the redhead next to her, and they both laughed. Not loud enough to be heard inside the audition room, but Rosa could see it. Could feel it. Something inside her snapped. Not in a bad way, in a way that cleared her head. These people didn't know her. They didn't know about the 9 years in the basement. They didn't know about Mrs. Liu's patient teaching, or her mom's tired hands from cleaning hospital floors so Rosa could have a chance at something better. They didn't know about the nights Rosa had practiced until her fingers ached, about the hundreds of hours she'd spent listening and learning and pushing herself. They saw a girl in a simple dress and assumed she didn't matter. But they were wrong. Rosa turned back to the piano. She closed her eyes and let everything else fall away. The judges, the contestants watching through the glass, the fancy concert hall, all of it. In her mind, she was back in that basement. Just her and the music. Just her and the piano that had become her best friend. She took one deep breath. Then her fingers came down on the keys. The opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Prelude exploded into the hall like thunder. Deep, powerful, dramatic. The sound was incredible. That Steinway grand piano responded to her touch in a way the old basement piano never could. Every note was crystal clear, every chord rich and full. It was like the piano had been waiting for her, waiting to show her what real music could sound like. Rosa's fingers moved across the keys with a confidence she didn't know she had. All those years of practice kicked in. Her muscle memory took over. She didn't have to think about where her fingers went. They just knew. Left hand playing those deep rumbling bass notes. Right hand dancing across the higher keys with the melody. The piece was dark and moody, full of emotion. It started powerful, then got soft and delicate, then built back up to those crashing chords again. It told a story without words. A story about struggle and pain, about hope and determination, about finding beauty even in dark places. And Rosa understood that story. She'd lived it. Every difficult passage in the music matched a difficult moment in her life. Every beautiful melody matched a moment of joy or hope. When she played the soft, tender sections, she thought about her mom's hands gently braiding her hair before school. When she played the powerful, dramatic sections, she thought about refusing to give up, about going back to that basement day after day, even when it would have been easier to quit. Her fingers flew across the keys, faster and faster. The music built toward its climax. This was the hardest part, the part that even professional pianists approached with caution. Rapid notes cascading up and down the keyboard, complex rhythms, big stretches that her small hands had to strain to reach. But Rosa didn't miss a single note. Not one. She'd practiced this piece so many times that it was burned into her soul. Her fingers knew exactly where to go, exactly how hard to press, exactly how long to hold each note. The final section approached. The music became softer again, more reflective, like looking back on everything that had come before. Rosa's touch on the keys was gentle now, almost fragile. She let each note breathe, let the sound fill the space before moving to the next one. And then came the ending. 3 powerful chords played with absolute conviction, the kind of chords that demanded to be heard, that couldn't be ignored. Rosa put everything she had into those final notes. All her years of practice, all her hope, all her determination to prove that she belonged here just as much as anyone else. The last chord rang out into the silence. Rosa held down the keys, letting the sound fade naturally. She didn't lift her hands until the last echo had died away completely. Then she sat there, her hands resting on the keys, her chest heaving like she'd just run a race. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody said anything. The silence was so complete that Rosa could hear her own heartbeat. She was afraid to turn around, afraid to see the judges' faces. What if she'd messed up and didn't even realize it? What if they hated it? But then she heard something. A sound so unexpected that she thought she might be imagining it. Someone was clapping. Rosa turned around slowly. The silver-haired judge was standing up, her hands coming together in steady applause. Her eyes were shining, and there was a smile on her face that looked genuine, not polite or forced. Real. Then the other 2 judges stood up too. They were clapping as well. All 3 of them standing and applauding. For her. Through the glass panels in the doors, Rosa could see that the waiting area had gone completely silent. The girl in the silver dress wasn't smirking anymore. Her mouth was hanging open slightly, her eyes wide. The boy in the expensive suit had his arms crossed, but he wasn't laughing. He looked stunned. They all did. One by one, the other contestants who'd been watching through the glass started clapping too. Some of them looked shocked. Some looked impressed. Some looked upset, like they'd just realized their biggest competition wasn't who they'd expected it to be. But they were all clapping, even the ones who'd been laughing at her earlier. Even the ones who'd assumed she didn't belong. They couldn't deny what they'd just heard. The silver-haired judge was wiping her eyes. Actually wiping tears. "That was extraordinary," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Truly extraordinary. The technical skill is impressive, but it's the emotion, the soul you brought to that piece. Where did you study?" Rosa stood up from the piano bench on shaky legs. "I didn't really study anywhere, ma'am. I taught myself, mostly." The 3 judges exchanged glances. The bearded man wrote something down on his notepad, underlining it several times. "Well," the silver-haired judge said, "you've taught yourself remarkably well." "Thank you, Rosa, that was beautiful." Rosa somehow managed to thank them and walk off the stage without tripping. Her legs felt like they weren't quite connected to her body anymore. The woman with the clipboard was waiting to escort her back to the waiting area, and she was smiling like she'd just witnessed something special. When Rosa walked back into the waiting room, every eye was on her. The room that had been buzzing with conversation before was now dead quiet. Her mom jumped up from her seat and rushed over, pulling Rosa into a tight hug. "I heard it through the door," her mom whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Baby, that was incredible." Rosa hugged her back, finally letting herself believe it. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She'd walked into that room as the girl who didn't belong, and walked out as a musician who'd left them all speechless. The subway ride home felt completely different from the ride there. Rosa sat next to her mom, still in a daze, trying to process what had just happened. Her fingers still tingled from playing. She kept replaying the moment in her head. The sound of that beautiful piano, the feeling of every note coming out exactly right, the judges standing up to applaud. "You okay, baby?" her mom asked, squeezing her hand. Rosa nodded. "I just can't believe I actually did it." "I can," her mom said with a proud smile. "I always knew you could." They'd been told the results would be announced in 1 week. 1 week to wait and wonder. 1 week of not knowing if that performance had been enough. Rosa tried not to get her hopes up too much. There had been so many talented kids there. Kids with years of expensive training. Kids who probably played perfectly too. What if the judges chose someone else? But deep down, something had shifted inside Rosa. Even if she didn't win, she'd proven something important to herself. She'd walked onto that stage terrified and walked off knowing she belonged there. That mattered more than any trophy. The week dragged by slower than any week in Rosa's life. She went to school, did her homework, went down to the basement to practice like always. But her mind was somewhere else. Mrs. Liu noticed right away. "You're distracted," the old woman said, finding Rosa sitting at the piano one afternoon without playing. "Still thinking about the audition?" "They said they'd call this week with the results," Rosa admitted. "But I haven't heard anything yet." Mrs. Liu sat down on the bench next to her the way she used to when Rosa was little. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. You did something brave. Most people never even try. What if I don't win? Then you pick yourself up and keep playing. That's what musicians do." Mrs. Liu patted her hand. "But between you and me, I think you won. I can see it in your eyes. You played from your heart, didn't you?" Rosa nodded. "I did. Then you already won the thing that matters most." 3 days later, Rosa was in the middle of her math class when she got called down to the office. Her teacher looked at her with a strange expression, and Rosa's heart started pounding. Getting called to the office was never good news. Had something happened to her mom? She practically ran down the hallway. When she burst into the office, the secretary smiled at her. "Rosa Martinez, you have a phone call. You can take it in the counselor's office right there." "A phone call?" Rosa's mind raced as she picked up the receiver with shaking hands. "Hello? Is this Rosa Martinez?" A woman's voice, professional and warm. "Yes, this is Rosa." "Rosa, this is Catherine Brennan. I was one of the judges at the Steinway Hall audition last Saturday." The silver-haired woman. Rosa remembered her. "I'm calling with some very exciting news. The panel was unanimous in our decision. We'd like to offer you first place in the Young Musicians Showcase." Rosa's knees went weak. She had to grab the edge of the desk to keep from falling. What? Really? Really?" The woman laughed. "Your performance was outstanding. The technical skill, the emotional depth, the sheer passion you brought to that piece. We were all moved by it. Honestly, Rosa, in my 15 years of judging this competition, I've never seen anything quite like what you did on that stage." Rosa couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face, and she couldn't make them stop. "Rosa, are you there?" "Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. I can't believe this. Believe it. You've earned it. Now the showcase gala is in 3 weeks. You'll perform your piece again in front of an audience that includes representatives from several music schools, professional musicians, and donors who support young talent. We'll send you all the details by email. Do you have any questions?" Rosa had about 1,000,000 questions, but her brain couldn't form coherent thoughts. "No, Thank you. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch soon." "Congratulations, Rosa. We're all very excited to see what your future holds." When Rosa hung up the phone, she just stood there for a moment, staring at nothing. Then she let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. The school counselor poked her head in. "Everything okay?" "I won," Rosa said, her voice barely a whisper. "I actually won." That evening, Rosa and her mom celebrated with takeout Chinese food, which they almost never got because it was too expensive. Her mom kept hugging her every few minutes, tears running down her face. "My baby girl. My talented, amazing baby girl," Rosa told Mrs. Liu the next day. The old woman hugged her tight and cried into Rosa's shoulder. "I knew it. I knew from the first day I saw you touch those keys. You had something special." The 3 weeks before the gala passed in a blur. Rosa practiced every day, making sure her piece was even better than it had been at the audition. She wanted to be perfect. No, not perfect. She wanted to be real, to play with the same emotion and honesty that had gotten her here in the first place. The night of the gala arrived. This time Rosa wasn't as nervous. She still felt butterflies, but they were excited butterflies, not scared ones. Her mom had bought her a new dress for the occasion, a simple but elegant black one. It had taken a chunk of their savings, but her mom insisted. "This is a special night. You deserve to feel special." Steinway Hall looked different at night, all lit up and glamorous. There were people in fancy evening wear everywhere, holding glasses of wine and chatting. Rosa recognized a few faces from videos she'd watched online, actual famous musicians and music teachers. People she'd only ever seen on her phone screen were here in the same room as her, but she wasn't intimidated this time. She belonged here. She'd proven that. When it was time to perform, Rosa walked onto that stage with her head held high. The audience was much bigger this time, hundreds of people instead of just 3 judges. But when she sat at that piano and her fingers touched the keys, everything else faded away again. It was just her and the music. She played the Rachmaninoff prelude even better than she had at the audition. Every note was exactly where it needed to be. Every emotion came through clear and strong. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. People actually stood up, the whole audience clapping and cheering. Rosa saw her mom in the third row crying happy tears, saw Mrs. Liu next to her beaming with pride, and she saw something else too: respect. In every face looking back at her, she saw respect. After the performance, people kept coming up to her. Representatives from 3 different music schools, all offering her full scholarships. Full rides to study piano at institutions she'd only dreamed about. One woman, a teacher from a prestigious conservatory, handed Rosa her card. "I'd be honored to work with you. You have a gift, Rosa. A real gift." A man who ran a classical music YouTube channel asked if he could feature her performance. "My subscribers need to hear this. We need more stories like yours in the classical music world." Even some of the other young musicians from the audition were there. The boy in the expensive suit approached her awkwardly. "Hey, I just wanted to say, your performance was incredible. Really. I'm sorry if I seemed... Anyway, you deserve to win." The girl in the silver dress didn't come over, but Rosa saw her watching from across the room. Their eyes met for a moment. The girl looked away first, her expression unreadable. Rosa didn't need her apology. She didn't need anything from these people anymore. Later that night, as Rosa and her mom and Mrs. Liu rode the subway home together, all 3 of them exhausted and happy, Rosa thought about everything that had led to this moment. That first day in the basement, curious and a little scared, pressing those piano keys for the first time. All the lunch breaks with Mrs. Liu, learning 1 note at a time. All the hours teaching herself from videos. All the times she'd wanted to give up but didn't. "What are you thinking about?" her mom asked. Rosa smiled. "I'm thinking about how I almost didn't go to the audition. I almost let those people make me believe I didn't belong." "But you didn't let them," Mrs. Liu said. "You trusted the music. And yourself," her mom added. "You trusted yourself," Rosa nodded. That was the real lesson in all of this. It wasn't about the trophy or the scholarships or the standing ovations, as wonderful as those things were. It was about learning to believe in herself. About understanding that where you come from doesn't determine where you can go. That passion and hard work and refusing to give up can take you places that money and privilege never could. The old piano in the basement was still there. Probably would be there for years to come. Rosa knew she'd move on to better instruments, to professional training, to bigger stages. But she'd never forget that basement. Never forget that beat-up upright with its yellowed keys. Never forget the sound of washing machines humming upstairs while she practiced. Because that's where her real music education happened. Not in fancy studios or expensive lessons, but in a dusty basement where a little girl touched a piano for the first time and discovered that she had something to say. And when she finally got the chance to say it, the whole world stopped to listen. 3 music schools wanted her. She had opportunities opening up that she'd never imagined possible. But the most important thing Rosa learned wasn't about music at all. It was about courage. About showing up even when you're scared, about playing your own song in your own way, and trusting that if it's real and true and comes from the heart, people will hear it. Rosa Martinez, the girl who learned piano in a basement from an elderly janitor, was going to be just fine. More than fine. She was going to be extraordinary, because she already was.